Hello, everyone. Welcome to my talk, Search Delight on Mobile with Algolia. My name is Ferdinand Bada. I'm an Android engineer based out of Nairobi, Kenya. Without further much ado, I'd like to talk about what full text search is and how I came across it. It's an exhaustive search method, essentially, that looks for any occurrence of a word, which in itself, as you think about it, it's simply what you expect when you search for something. But full text is much more than that because the page is indexed in such a way that the searching is much more efficient and it's more delightful. And it's a technique that is popular among a lot of search engines out there. You think about the popular Google, they use that. And even earlier, I think I was searching some of the users on Algolia, on Talc for droidCon. I believe that they use full text search as well. I'm not sure which client they use, which third-party tool, or if they have their own implemented. I was working on Firebase, and I realized that Firebase doesn't support this functionality out of the box just like that. And it really is sad because at the moment, all you have to do is just search, and if the word doesn't occur exactly as it is, then you won't find any such results. And so I faced a need recently, and I needed to work on this application. And I realized that there's not that much documentation, not that much as I would like anyway. It's there, but it's not as documented as I would like, and it's not that beginner friendly. So I thought I might try to simplify that. However, having said that, I believe that this talk has a bit of some advanced nature to it. So some basic understanding of some JavaScript. If you've done Android with Jetpack components before, that is also going to help you massively. I'm going to explore some of the code samples that have been used, some of those things that I had to come up with myself. And just for the record, I did get in touch with some engineers from Algolia to just sort of cross-check the presentation and just, point out some of the mistakes, if any, just correct and improve. And so you can trust that this is something that has been proven. I've worked with it before a lot of times. So without further ado, let's actually get straight into the code. One more thing that I'd like to say about full text search is that the way that the text is presented, the results are presented to the user, they're the same way that you're used to, say, for example, in Google. You expect that what you've searched for is highlighted and it's in bold sometimes. And this is the same thing that you're going to expect from Algolia once you implement it from Android. So let's talk about if you have an existing application. So if you have an existing application and you want to improve the search functionality, or if you have one and you want to improve it, then you need to find a way of importing that data to Algolia. And one of the ways that I've found that you can actually do this simply is by using Firebase Cloud Functions. And these are excellent tool. So the first thing that you need to do is basically just need to hand over to the Algolia website, and you need to create an index. So if you're developing and you're trying out new things, I just want to get a feel of the product and everything, then you can just get a trial for 2 weeks and then just get a feel of what you have. And then you basically initiate Cloud Functions. You set up your Cloud Functions, and I'm assuming that you're comfortable using that. So I'm not going to be getting that much into how to actually initiate it at first. So I'm going to assume that you're okay, as I stated earlier. So the first step happens in the index.js file. If you've worked with the Cloud Functions, then you're going to be familiar with this. So the first thing you need to, I believe this is like importation in JavaScript. My JavaScript is not that good. I had to do a lot of research. So I believe this is similar to importation. So for example, if you're coming from an Android background. So yeah, the first thing that you need to sort of import Algolia search. And then from your dashboard, from the one that you just opened, you're going to see that you'll see an app ID and an API key, and you need both of those ones to actually come and work with them. A word of caution here is that you really should put these these two variables as they are in the index.js file. A better approach would probably to store them as environment variables, so that you always want to program and you want to take care of company secrets, so to speak. So you need to take that into consideration. Then the next thing you need to do is you need to initialize your client, and basically you use the Algolia search, which takes 2 arguments. That's the app ID and then the admin key. So in our case, which was really my case at that time, so I thought I wouldn't change that much. I decided to use the case study of a chat application, a chat functionality. So I decided to use an index called chat and chats. And an index basically is you can think of it in terms of it's your collection of data that's going to be on Algolia. So the same collection that you're going to have on Firebase, Firestore, or data real-time database, you really should be using Firestore, is what is going to be present, is what is going to be imported, and you're going to call that an index. So moving on. So how would you actually write this cloud function? And this was one of the pain points that I actually came through when I was implementing Algolia. And I realized that I needed to improve this. I needed to come up with something that would work for a lot of people, beginners, experienced developers alike. Because you Google how to actually write these cloud functions, and there's a lot of information out there. Some of it is outdated, some of it doesn't work, some of it doesn't work as you expect because it's using perhaps an older version of an older implementation of say Node.js or JavaScript, and it gets really difficult and it gets really confusing and frustrating, especially when you're working with a deadline. And as Android developers, we know that a lot of deadlines, we have to deal with them, not just Android developers, really, software developers in general. We're going to have a lot of those to deal with. So in here, in my index.js file, again, this is just a continuation of the same. I'm going to have a function that's called add chats Firestore data to Algolia. And this data is the one that comes from Firestore to Algolia, as the name suggests. So I'd like you to notice a few things here. First of all, this cloud functions have different kinds of triggers, and this trigger is the HTTPS trigger. So with that, once we establish that's our trigger, then we go ahead and initialize an empty chat array. And once we do that, we need to get a reference to our chats collection. So in our Firestore, our collection is going to be called chats. So with that reference, we then get a list of all the documents, and we iterate through all the documents through a for each loop. So once we do that for each, we get the charts document, which is basically in the data of that doc, which is basically the argument that I put there in the doc of the for each. And then there's something else that I want you to note is that there's the object ID. And the object ID, as the comment shows, is that each object that you get from Firestore and import into Algolia must have a key that is called object ID. So basically, you need to write that object ID as it is. If you don't actually assign it, then a random ID will be assigned for that object by Algolia automatically. So this is one step that I decided to implement. But if you say you forgot to implement this part to assign an ID from the doc, then it's going to be okay. It's going to work as expected because Algolia is going to give you that key. And we basically return. These are just listeners, for callbacks, basically to just listen to what we just did and see that everything has been implemented or has been imported as expected. So if the documents are successfully imported into Algolia, then we can log that data and say that documents have been imported successfully into Algolia. Otherwise, we catch the error, and then we basically take it away from there. So once this happens, you need to find a way of actually, once you import your data, you actually need to see that data. That is basically the cloud function. And the cloud function is to be deployed. So once you deploy that cloud function, then you need to head over to the GCP website. That's the console.cloud.google something. It's easy enough to find. So once you're there, you remember that we used an HTTP trigger. So using an HTTP trigger, there's a URL that's going to be generated, and we need to click on that URL so that data is actually imported into Algolia from Firestore. So in the name of the cloud function, import into Algolia. I came up with that myself. Anyway, you just basically head to the GCP website, and then down here on the bottom left, you can see there's a section here called Cloud Functions. And I was actually supposed to clean that out, but it's all right. You get the idea. The Cloud Functions, you can see that for this particular project, I have 18 functions. So you click on that, and you're going to see the function that you wrote. And basically, I'm just going to go back one slide. And the function that we wrote is add chats Firestore data to Algolia. And you're going to see it exactly as that. So once you click on it, there's going to be several tabs that you're going to see. I didn't include that slide here, but I'm just going to explain what you're going to expect to see. So you're going to see several tabs for that particular cloud function that we wrote, add Firestore, add chat Firestore data to Algolia. And it's going to have several tabs, and one of them tabs is called trigger. So within that trigger, you need to click on actually the URL that you're going to find there, because we used an HTTP, so you actually need to, to click that HTTP, that URL, and and your cloud function is going to run. So one of the strange things that I found while I was actually doing this was that it doesn't actually, when you're running it, that is, you don't actually get sort of like a log written. And I suppose I could, get someone perhaps in future to sort of improve this process, try maybe understand why exactly that wasn't happening. Because in my mind, I knew that I recently console log. So I expected some sort of log to run to sort of display, but I found that it doesn't display. And that is not something that should actually discourage you. So basically just head back to your Algolia, dashboard and find your index and then refresh your page. And you're going to find your data there. If you don't, I found that 10 times out of 10, really, so far, it has worked exactly as expected. So yeah, once you do that, then you're going to see that your data is in the charts. So with everything that has been done, you may be thinking, do I have to actually do this process every time that I want to update my data or create or delete? Do I have to do this every time? And the answer, as you expected, is no, you don't have to do this every time, because there are listeners that are there, and these ones are basically just there to help you whenever there are changes in your data. That's basically a new addition, an update, or a delete. And there's something that I would like to point out. The previous two slides, basically where you add your data, your existing data, they're not going to be relevant to you if you have a new project. If you have a new project, then you won't have data to actually upload. And so you actually need to, you won't have data to upload. And so you wouldn't necessarily need to import new data. So the first thing is for new data. If you're just new, and as I explained before, I'm going to be using the assumption of a chat app. So you can see that I'm calling a function that's called add post to index. And basically, it's going to be taking posts. So posts is the name of your collection. And basically, you need to put a wildcard there. That's a post ID. So on create, you basically create your data, you snapshot.id, and then you save it. So these are actually pretty straightforward, the way that they are written. It's JavaScript, yes, but even if you don't actually understand JavaScript, by reading through it, you can sort of get an idea of what it's doing. So on create, snapshot, the second one is on update, which is a change, and then on delete. So on delete, you actually don't need to do much things. It's just your index. You just go ahead and delete. And the index that I'd like to point out here is the index that you actually initiated while you were setting up Algolia in the index.js file at the very top of the file. So you would have your indices there, and in this case, let's call post index the one that we initialize the charts. So you would do that, and then you would remove it from that index. But the names, you need to actually match those indices, because if you mess that one up, then obviously it won't work. At best, you won't get data. At worst, which I believe is the more likely option, I'm not entirely sure, I've not tried it, but I believe your app is going to crash, and really you don't want to do that. So so you would do this, and notice that for each three, they use the name of the collection on Firestore. In our case, it's posts, and basically you need an ID, considering that we're not working with bulk lists, but we are actually working with specific data. So in this case, then it's going to be, you need to actually find a way of identifying each post. And in this case, we're going to be using post ID. All right. Water. So let's move on to Android now, and you'll excuse me a little bit. The resolution isn't so good, but so as I explained before, Algolia uses the MVVM design pattern, which is the one that is recommended by Google. If you can combine that somehow with clean architecture, even better. But I think as a beginning, well, how should I say, as a beginning step, as an introduction, if you will, into Algolia, I believe that we can just take a look at MVVM, and then if you want to iterate over it over time with clean architecture, that is fine. There's no problem at all. So you have a view model, and it's called My View Model. And the first thing that you need to do, as with the index.js, you need to initiate. You basically need to configure your client. So the client takes in three parameters: the application ID, the API key, and the log level that you want. So the log level is essentially if you use something like, say, OK HTTP and interceptors before, to just log the data that you get back, say, from Retrofit, from any URL, and from any API call that you have, then it's just going to be logged to the log cat. I believe that is actually it's an optional variable, the log level, so you can actually decide to remove that, and it's going to be okay. It's going to work just fine. So after that, we need to initiate our index, and again, our index is going to take the index name that we initiated before, which in our case is going to be chats. After that, you need something called the searcher, and the searcher takes in an index. So if you remember before, I said that it uses MVVM, and aside, it also uses one of the packages from MVVM that it uses is the paging library. Now, it uses the older implementation of the paging library. It doesn't actually use paging 3. I'm not entirely sure if that's been updated, but this is going to work just fine. The paging 3 library has its own benefits, of course, but this is going to work just fine as well. Again, word of caution: please don't put your company secrets in a public in an APK that can just be decompiled by anyone and just find that information. So you get a data source factory, and basically you use a lambda there. So I've done the serialization manually here, but they recommend, the Algolia team recommends that you actually use a library, say, for example, the Coordinates serialization library. Then it can do much wonders for you if you want to. But this, for the sake of this demonstration, I believe this is enough. So once we get that hit, which is in the lambda there, and I'm just going to get that data according to my model, which is just a chart. So it's going to have a key, a poster, the person who posted it, and the time that it was posted. And I'd like to point you to the third item there, which is a highlighted result. And a highlighted result is basically a value that you override in your model. And this is the one that actually provides the functionality that I talked about before, the functionality that your application is going to show results that are actually highlighted. It's not a must that you do this, but one of the whole points of actually using Algolia is to improve the search functionalities and delight your users. So I believe you should just go ahead and do it. And it's a value that you override, and you can go ahead and configure it on the dashboard however way you like, what to actually highlight. And once you get them back, then you can deserialize them in a similar manner. After that, we get our page list configuration, which is basically just setting the page size and enabling placeholders. I believe this is clear on the next slide. Yes, there it is. So it's basically just a page list configuration, and we set the page size to 50, and we enable placeholders. We just set that to false. Again, we have to get our live page list because we're using paging here. And the builder basically takes the factory and the config in line with the paging library, the older implementation, at least, of the paging library, not the paging 3, I believe. So yeah, and then after that, we get the search box, which just takes the searcher and your list of chats and your stats. Basically, the stats are basically you could think of them as the hits. Or when you do, say, a Google search, you get, say, 18 million results in 0.02 seconds. That's what that box does. And you need to implement your connect. You need to initialize your connection, the connection handler. And then in the init box, you basically init everything, the connection. You hook it up with the search box and the stats. And we should be good citizens, I believe. In the onClear, we clear everything. We cancel our searcher, and we clear our connection as well. And everything we're doing here is in line with the MVVM, especially using paging essentially. So if at this point you wanted to move some of this logic to a repository class, that would be okay as well. keep things much, much cleaner here. But this is okay. It's going to work just fine. But for maintenance, in future, I believe this is not an implementation that you want to stick with in the long run. But if you want to get something quickly working just fine, and it's going to be using pretty much most of the best practices, then this is an approach that you can take. So let's move on to the fragment. So in a fragment, what you need is your connection, you need your view model. Basically, this is a default query, which is basically just an empty string, and an adapter. So your adapter is obviously going to be using paging. So your adapter is going to be a live page list adapter, yes, according to the old implementation of the paging library. So in your own view created, you will basically check if our query is empty, and the query is basically going to come from the search that is actually going to be initiated by the user. And one thing to note is that Algolia, it has some of the functionalities that I talked about before, was that you can't get a hit on Firestore natively if you actually don't find a word that matches exactly what you've typed. But Algolia has something called tolerance, which you can set on the Algolia dashboard. And basically, you're going to tell the Algolia, say, tool, if you will, what is the tolerance? Say, when do I start searching? If say, a user makes a mistake or has a typo, Algolia is actually smart enough to think, okay, it's possible that this user wanted to search for something, probably this. So let's give him something or her, something that actually closely matches what has been typed. And there's a lot of things that you can do. You can also configure, say, the minimum number of characters that a user has to type before you actually start searching, before you actually initiate a search. And there are different kinds of searches that you can initiate. You can basically initiate a search as they type. So you would do that basically in the view model. That's another implementation that you would do. I didn't talk about it. But if you wanted, then you could also search once the search button has actually been pressed. It really depends on your use case. Whichever way works just fine. My experience, I believe that as the user searches and then they get the results, I believe that's a more seamless and much more delightful experience. So we basically set the listeners here and to a search bar and a search view box, initialize your adapter, and Algolia has this swipe refresh layout that is actually implemented in the library itself, that in the library that they provide for use for developers on Android. You actually has that. So you don't actually need to do much things. You basically just need to set it up in your XML and just hook it up in your in your fragment. So again, you get a loading view. That's something that also comes with Algolia, and it's actually hooked, as you can see, to the swipe refresh layout. After that, we need to hook up our connection with our search box, with our loading starts, with our loading states. Again, all these come from the view model. And once you do this, let's continue right here. We can, again, use the, I'm using a live data, it's a paged list, yeah. So I'm just gonna call that an observing, and I'm using a view lifecycle owner instead of this for the lifecycle owner, and observe with the sum, and I submit my list. Again, an auto scroll to start, that is just something that actually makes your search functionalities all the more delightfully. Again, just like the way we are doing it in the view model, you need to clean up your connection. We need to be good citizens, I suppose, where we can just develop applications just for the sake of it. So I would have liked if I could come with a live implementation of something that I've worked on. But unfortunately, those, as I talked about earlier, those are company secrets, and I really can't talk about them. I really can't come and show it. For example, this is a production application that has not actually hit production; it's still in alpha, so I'm not actually going to talk about them. However, the Algolia team has a great implementation that is currently living on GitHub. So I decided to grab the GIF or the GIF, depending on wherever part of the world that you're from. I decided to grab that and just give you a feel, give the developers a feel of what is actually expected, of what you actually expect to see once you implement this functionality on your application. Some of the things, what exactly do you think is going to happen? And this is basically what is going to happen. And this is based on the application that is actually given by Algolia on the GitHub page. So as you can see, someone is going to search something, and there's a lot of things that I haven't talked about, and these are basically configurations. They're just configurations that you can use to improve the application. They don't necessarily have to be done, but they're just things that you can use to even configure your application to be that much more delightful. As I talked about earlier, there's a lot of configurations that you can do on the dashboard of Algolia. So, for example, if you wanted, you could, as I said before, you could play around with your tolerance level. So you want how many typos, you want how many words, how many characters that a user has types, that you want to search from which index and things like that. Which ones do you want to highlight? Which ones don't you want to highlight? And things like that. It's the opportunities. The opportunities of refreshing, of amazing your users are so endless, and I believe that more and more developers should be implementing tools like this, such as Algolia in the application. Full disclosure, this is not actually this is not say paid promo or anything. This is just something that we realized in our team that we needed, and I had the responsibility of making it happen. And this is the research that I found. The research that I did, and the findings that I found in actually coming and implementing them, and the pain points, the joys. Yes, it is very joyful at the end, but the pain points that I went through were not they were painful, as the name suggests. So after that, I actually did a couple of articles on my blog where I basically talk about Algolia, starting from full text search, how to actually implement your cloud function, how to implement those cloud functions. I haven't talked about deployment because I assume that you already know. And besides, a lot of great articles on deployment out there that you can go ahead and use. I also talked about how to listen and how to implement all this data in your Android application. And I wrote them on my blog, so you can go ahead and check them. They're on Hashnote. These slides are going to be shared, but it was a great experience learning this new technology, this delightful new technology, and it really is a shame that not very many developers out there have come across it. I mean, even I suppose this is the whole point of of talks such as these ones, to kind of expose ourselves to new things that could help us even more. So I believe that more people, and next time that you have something that's stuck, you can just go ahead and check out these links. I'll share these slides as I said before, so that's not a problem. And then if you have any problems, or if you run into challenges or run into something that is new, something that can actually benefit other people, just go ahead and let me know on my Twitter, on my socials, basically. So these are my socials. You can just go ahead and let me know if you have something in mind. So thank you very much. It wasn't that long of a talk, but it's been amazing, and I'd be very, very happy if there are any questions that I can take. So yeah. Let's see. What was the hardest part of you building the whole search? Well, the hardest part was the research that I had to do at first, because it was non-existent. So you go to you go to Google, and you check some of the resources that are there, and they're great. And you check out the comments, for example, say on Medium, and you could see that someone has done it before, and it's working for them. They actually have, say, a screenshot or a GIF of things working, but they're not working for yourself. And it was even more difficult for someone such as myself, coming from a Java and Kotlin background, trying to figure out JavaScript, trying to understand why this is logging, why this is not logging. Excuse me. I'm not entirely sure how I actually came to figure this out, but it was hours and hours of research that was just painful every day. Because so I even remember having to do a bit of a JavaScript course in trying to understand how things work with JavaScript, a bit of the catching, logging those errors. Not entirely sure why I couldn't figure out why the data wasn't logging properly. But things got easier because I went on Twitter one day, and it was a long day, so I just vented out my frustration, and said that, some basically suggestions to the Algolia team on how they could say improve their the documentation team. And one of the engineers actually got in touch with me, and they directed me to some of the resources, a bit hard to find. And I took a look at them step by step, and I implemented them in my application, and that made things all the more easier. But I believe that if I had more documentation at first, then this would have been so much easier. All right, so Algolia provides an SDK that you can use to provide a great search experience. That is correct. Yes, Algolia does have an SDK that you can use, and they have a Java and Kotlin client. Obviously, I did mine in Kotlin, so it's right there. And to implement it, you actually need to go through all the steps that I just outlined in this talk. You need to you need to set up your cloud functions if you want to use cloud functions. I suppose something that I should point out is that cloud functions isn't the only solution, I suppose. If you wanted to take a different approach, say, for example, if you're not using Firestore, if you're using your own data, let's say, and you wanted to implement this, then you wanted to implement your data from your database to Algolia, then cloud functions are not the only thing I've come to realize. So you can just go ahead and implement whatever solution feels fit for you. For myself, we were using Firebase, and so I had to use cloud functions. So you need to set those up, and you need to understand MVVM intimately, because I realized that as I was talking to another member of my teammate and basically trying to get some help, and if your level of MVVM is low, it's going to be tricky to actually understand how the SDK works and everything. Another thing that could come as a challenge is, say, when you're handling errors, because I realized that it doesn't actually handle errors natively. So you'd have to come up with some sort of implementation, perhaps in a view model, to check that the data you're getting back is, is valid or something. So you need to actually have an understanding of how things work in line with MVVM, and not simply just hacking things and just putting them there. It's going to work, yes, but ultimately, as we all know, maintenance is gonna be an issue. So you need to put that into consideration. Yes, the SDK is there. Yes, the links, I'm going to include them, so you can go and take a look at it. The algorithm is also going to be handy to actually help you if you have any problems. So that's always an option if you want. Right, let's see. Did you also look into Elasticsearch before picking up Algolia? Is there any benefit of using Elasticsearch over Algolia? To tell you the truth, I didn't really use Elasticsearch for full text search. All I did was Algolia. But if I'm not mistaken, I believe Elasticsearch is I believe it's the other tool that Firebase recommends. I'm not entirely sure of this one, but yeah, I had to move fast. We had to move fast as my team, so I only had the chance to look at Algolia. But if you have suggestions of how I can take a look at Elasticsearch and Algolia, please, by all means, just go ahead and recommend that to me. But I believe that I believe they're both great tools. The fact that they were recommended by the Firestore team, for implementing Firestore search, full text search in Firestore. I believe there has to be some benefits to use it, but I couldn't tell you out of the box what the benefit of Elasticsearch over Algolia is, considering that I have not explored Elasticsearch, and even then I've actually explored Algolia to that much depth, if you will. Let's see. Great talk. Thank you. Hasn't been easy. So do we have any more questions? If you don't have any more questions, we can just go ahead and connect. I'll be in the chat, the talk chat system. I'm open to a discussion or a video call, I suppose. I'm really just a discussion of what we've talked about, anything new. We can talk about it and we can improve. Otherwise, thank you very much to the droidCon team, and thank you everyone for attending the talk. And well, it's evening here, my time. I believe in Berlin it's afternoon or late evening. Have a great day. Thank you.